Jeff Elkins, and this is the Dialogue Doctor Podcast. Today on the podcast, Dialogue Doctor Coach Laura Humm talks writing character voices and structuring thrillers in this very special office hour. Okay, so some of you are probably right now wondering what an office hour is, since I said that that's what we're doing in this session. It's something we started doing during the Dialogue Dash. So we are about to hold our fourth Dash, starting on September 28th. I'd love for you to sign up for it. Go to dialoguedoctor.com, and you can find the button in the menu that says the Dash, and you can sign up there. It's $80 for 80 days. Of community time together. In that 80 days, we block it into 3 sections. We'll do some time where we break down what you're working on and think about it in different ways and kind of twist it around in different ways to make your writing, your plot, your characters, all of that stronger. And then we'll do a writing sprint for 30 days where we will all sprint together during the month of November, and then in December we'll do a couple weeks on editing and try to set you up for editing it appropriately. So that is the Dash. It is September 28th to December 14th. I would love for you to come and sign up. We'll do 9 webinars during that time where a Dialogue Doctor Coach jumps on a Zoom call and we teach something, work on something, help you put together something in your novel. There's 2 workbooks you get. You get to be part of the Dialogue Doctor Slack community, which is rocking awesome. Just lots of amazing stuff that happens during the Dash. But one of the things that happens is there's a total of 30 office hours. So what an office hour is a Dialogue Doctor Coach will just put a time on the calendar and be like, okay, every Tuesday at 4:30 Eastern, I'm going to be on from 4:30 to 5:30 on Zoom. Anybody can jump on, and we're just going to talk about whatever struggles or questions or problems you're having. And it's great because you don't just have a coach there, but you also get to leverage the community and what the community's talking about. So it's a really just fantastic time to come to understand things. That's what the episode is today. Laura is running an office hour with some of the dialoguers. And it is just hey, show up with your questions and let's chat. Anyway, we'll do 3 of those a week during the Dash. Me, Laura, and JP each have one. We space them out on the calendar, so we try to get everybody in the world a time where you can show up. And it's a lot of fun. And if you're worried, I don't know that I'll be able to make things, we record everything, and you get it. You get a recording of it almost right after it happens, which is we try to get it to you as quickly as possible. So even if you can't come live to things, you'll be able to keep up with the community because you get recordings as they go. So, that is September 28th to December 14th. You can sign up at thedialoguedoctor.com. Go and sign up there. And it is a lot of fun. I'd love for you to come and join us. And today you get kind of a sample of an office hour. Okay, another announcement that is happening in the community is C.S. Lakin and I are doing a online intensive masterclass. And it is going to be Tuesday, September 23rd, from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm really excited about it. We're each gonna kind of go back and forth and teach you some things about dialogue, work on some things about dialogue. I'm honestly just really pumped to learn from C.S. Lakin. It's gonna be great. The cost of this is $40, so come and join in. You can, if you're in the newsletter, I'll send out a link this week for you to sign up, or you can find it on Everbright if you look for Dialogue Deep Dive. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, it's Tuesday, September 23rd. So 2 big things happening. The deep dive with C.S. Lakin and then the Dialogue Dash on the 28th. Don't miss either of those. Come and sign up for them. Okay, I think that's all the announcements. Personal update. Man, I don't know. I got sick this week. I came down with a cold, pretty bad one. And it was fine for the first couple of days. I didn't even think about it. And then Thursday, it just hit me in the face, and it was a rough day. And I'm recording this Sunday night. I'm just now feeling like myself again, but I'm really weak. I was walking around the grocery store today getting groceries for my family because I'm the cook in the house. So I was walking around picking up groceries for the family, and I was just sweating. It's really gross. The grocery store is actually kind of cold. I was in Walmart. It was kind of cold. And everybody was looking at me like I had the plague. I felt like this is a dated reference, but I felt like it was the opening of the movie Outbreak. Like I was just like walking around. Like I was like some kind of like patient zero that was going to kill everybody with my gross, disgusting sweats. Anyway, that's a fun picture for you, isn't it? So if you can hear a little bit of like weakness in my voice right now, that is why, because I have just been out of it. And I know what did it too. We decided on Tuesday, we were like, you know what, we're turning off the air conditioning because it's so beautiful outside. This is like a beautiful time of year. And we're going to open up all the windows to the house. But we have this giant pine tree outside my front window that just spews pollen all day long. I love trees. I hate cutting plants down, trees down. I hate it. I refuse to kill plants or cut down trees. Um, and I really need to cut this one down because it's definitely what made me sick this week. Anyway, but yeah, that's how I'm doing. That's what's going on for me. I did go to my first mix and mingle with other screenplay writers and producers. My friend Sean invited me down. This was like the night before I really got sick, and it was fantastic. Man, I met some really amazing people. It's really cool, and I'm sharing that to say, like, because when I first started writing and I first really got into writing novels 10 years ago, I was very anti-community. I was really nervous to meet other writers. I didn't want to engage in community. And I spent really, until I started the Dialogue Doctor, I isolated myself from other writers and from community. It really out of a deep, crippling self-doubt is what it was. And if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you've kind of watched me get out of that. But it's taken me 5 years of work to kind of move out of that self-doubt and really come to understand what I bring and like the value that I contribute. But I would avoid community. And so it was great to just have a different mindset and to show up and to hang out with people. I met so many cool people that have done like so much cool stuff. And as a guy who's just like working on his third screenplay, it was really neat to see people who have been like, yeah, I've produced movies. I've like made these things. I've been working in this industry for 20 years. I feel like just sitting there with them, I learned, and listening to their stories, I learned so much. It was so neat. Anyway, that is my personal update. So, yeah, I think that's it. Let's get into the office hour with Laura.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Humm. I'm one of the Dialogue Doctor coaches, and I'm here for another exciting office hour. I have Mary and John here with me today. So without further ado, John, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little about where you are in your writing journey?
Yes, thank you, Laura, for having me on. My name is John Kraus. I live in Wisconsin. I am the author of middle grade fiction. I have a fiction series. The protagonist is his name is Pudge Amazon, and there are three stories. That are humorous mysteries for readers ages 8 to 11. And so I got three published, and looking for more in that series. Plus looking to develop some other children's novels as well.
Congratulations on getting 3 published. I think the last time we were talking, you were working on book 2.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
That's a lot of work there. Excellent. Mary, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Mary Van Everbrook, and I live in Pennsylvania. And I basically write dialogue-centric short stories for the time being.
Wonderful. Wonderful. But you have lots of aspirations to write longer novels too now,
Lots
right?
of ideas, right? Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm so happy you both were able to join me today. Um, I would really like to just kind of turn it over to the two of you so you can ask your questions and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. And I would definitely love to hear from each of you in answering your questions as well. So,
Okay. All right. Well, The question that I had posed as a topic of discussion for tonight was enhancing dialogue so characters sound different. Now, the reason I posted that question is across my three novels that I've written, um, I mean, these are the first three that I have written. So I'm learning as I go and improving my craft as I go. And Laura and I have talked twice before, and she's given me some Laura, I guess, Laura, you've given me some very great tips and help in improving dialogue. I've been intentional in having my characters speak differently. Pudge, he is spontaneous, he's mischievous, he's a shoot first and ask questions kind of later kind of kid. His best friend, Rocky, is the complete opposite. He is nervous and anxious. He's a rule follower. He's hesitant to jump into Pudge's misadventures. So I have been very deliberate about trying to make them sound different. And one of the writing craft tips that you hear about sometimes is readers should be able to know who is speaking without a dialogue tag attached. Well, I have gotten great feedback from writing critique partners, beta readers. I have a person I work with as a developmental editor and line editor. Uh, During the process of writing either my first or second novel, I had a beta reader who commented that the characters all sounded the same. Well, I just brushed that off because, well, I disagreed, but okay. Well, but then in my for my second novel, um, I hired a reputable copy editor, and it was just to do a final polish of the manuscript before I published it. This was self-published, so just checking for grammar and syntax. However, this person said, even though you're only paying me for a copy edit, I do want to mention that all your characters sound the same. I
Mm,
was Oh, I was very deflated to hear that because now that's the second person who has said that to me. And so I guess that's why I'm just bringing that up because I've been intentional about it
hmm
to still have that comment come. It's like, well, okay, what is it that I'm missing? And I could share. I didn't have anything exactly prepared to share, but I could pull something up here if need be. But anyway, that's just the background of why I'm coming here to ask that question. I feel like there's maybe something more fundamental that I'm missing because I do incorporate, um, Pudge. He's talks quickly and he talks forcefully. He uses a lot of contractions and a lot of body language that's listening, go go go. Whereas Rocky, his best friend, is a lot more, you know, hesitant to do things, and he uses fewer contractions and a little more deliberate speech. And so it's like, well, if they still sound the same, then what else am I missing? What other things can I do to help distinguish the two of them without having to use a dialogue tag to identify the speaker?
sure. And your challenge is made even harder in that you're not writing adult voices, you're writing children's voices, which
Right.
makes dialogue even more difficult to craft. First, I want to reassure you that you are not alone in hearing this. There are many, many authors out there who hear their characters' voices very loudly in their head. So when they're
Yeah.
reading their own work, it feels like they're so different. But part of the reason that you feel that they're so different, that maybe your readers aren't feeling it, is because they don't have that same picture in their head that you have. I mean, you spend a lot of time with Pudge and Rocky, right? Like you write their books, you think about their next adventures. So you're kind of spending a lot of time with them. So, one of the things that I heard you say that you're using as a distinguishing feature between your characters is contractions. Contractions is a great way to show differences between characters. Unfortunately, it's one of the more subtle characteristics that not every reader, especially a middle grade reader, is going to pick up on, because middle grades are kind of like they're learning the differences between grammar and
Yeah.
syntax.
Yeah.
So, what I did like what you said that I want to spend a few minutes on is the forcefulness with which Pudge is speaking and the hesitation that Rocky is using. So, can you tell us a little bit about what tricks that you're using in your dialogue that you are using to show that distinction between those characters?
Well, I don't think it's so much about the dialogue per se. It would be the action tags that are associated with the dialogue. So Pudge is
Mm-hmm,
going to, when he's fired up and he's emotional, he's going to step into people's faces
mm-hmm,
and he's going to be loud. Whereas Rocky doesn't do that, right? He's going to maybe take a step back if he's being challenged. Whereas if Pudge is challenged, he's going to take a step forward and put his fists up, so to speak. So there is body language and there's
mm-hmm.
action tags um, to show that.
Okay,
Um, but nothing immediately comes to mind. I don't have a snippet of dialogue that immediately comes to mind that where it's within quotation marks that shows those personality traits.
sure.
I guess I would say Rocky asks more questions,
Mm,
whereas Pudge is like, "All right, this is what we're doing." That would be very forceful. Whereas Rocky would be, "Are you sure we should be doing this?" So there's an example
mm-hmm.
of within the dialogue how Pudge is very forceful and very just kind of take charge, whereas Rocky's more hesitant and restraint, and like we're gonna get in trouble if we do this kind of thing. So
So it sounds like you're relying a lot on the topics that the characters talk about to distinguish their voices, and that's a really great place to start. I would also add, and I like that you're talking about their action tags are different. I would recommend moving the placement of their action tags so that Pudge's action tags and body language happen at the end of his dialogue, where Rocky's happen before the dialogue. That's going to do a lot to set apart that in your faceness from the hesitation. There's something about the way the brain processes how and when the action or the dialogue is being associated with a character when we know that the tag is happening before the words and we have time to visualize what that character is doing, especially if you're using body language like Rocky stepped back away from the rest of the group, dropped his head, and said, "I don't know, guys. I think we're going to get in trouble for this." Right? Or are you sure we're not going to get in trouble? Adding those elements all together can take what you're having from one line of dialogue to a whole embodiment of that emotion. Sometimes we think of dialogue as just what happens between the quotes, but really, dialogue is anything that's conveying the character and what the character has to say. So their action, their tags, their body language, the cadence of what they're saying. So the grammatical structure is also part of dialogue. Now, that's not necessarily traditionally how dialogue is taught. Dialogue has traditionally been taught. Dialogue happens between the quotation marks. But when we're writing a story and we're trying to create a voice, really digging into those differences can really make a difference.
yeah, and I appreciate that because what we hear is in real life as human beings, not characters on a page, is that our communication, what 7% is spoken, right? The
Mm-hmm.
rest is unspoken through body language, through tone, through whatever. And so those are things, yeah, that I
Mm-hmm.
agree that need to be also conveyed on the page as unspoken dialogue, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
body language that shows on the page.
Yep.
So,
So another way that I think you can start distinguishing the characters and how they sound is the structure of the sentences they're using.
mm,
And the exercise I always recommend for this is color coding, where each character gets their own color. Because, it's not a Dialogue Doctor podcast that I do that doesn't talk about color in some way, shape, or form, right? Like, let's be real. Crayola pays me by the number of times I mention their color names. No, that's not true. But if anybody from Crayola is listening and would like to sponsor the Dialogue
sure.
Doctor, I'm in for it. By color coding, you can very quickly see the structure of each character and what feels the same between the colors and what feels different. So the first thing that I had mentioned was moving the dialogue tags. Instantly, there's a different flow to the conversation. But then we also have to look at what's in the quotes. I like how you described about what they're talking about looks different, but another easy trick for making the characters really sound different is making what they're saying longer or shorter in distinction from each other. So, for
Mm,
example, Pudge is very decisive and in your face and kind of acts now and thinks later. So,
yeah,
using shorter sentences for him, maybe punctuated with an exclamation point, can really drive home the urgency in what he's saying. Whereas Rocky tends to be a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit slower to speak. You can add some distinction there by running a couple of sentences of his together. Maybe he doesn't get a full thought out the first time. Maybe he starts a thought and then gets distracted by something he's thinking, and there's a little bit of body language in the middle, and then he finishes his sentence. Maybe he has a lot of thoughts and he just runs them all together. I don't really think this is a good idea. We're going to get in trouble. Our parents said blah, blah, blah. And then Pudge can be like, doesn't matter. We're doing it. Right? Like,
yeah,
so the structure of their sentences now changes. One is a little bit more verbose, one is a little bit less wordy, but much more decisive in what he's saying.
yeah,
So those kinds of adjustments to the structure of your sentence can help pull those voices apart from what you're seeing, which is they're saying very different things, which is a very good starting place because sometimes authors are really good with the dialogue tag movement and the body language, but then the topics that their characters talk about are the same, and they have to work on that part. You're starting from the other place where what they're saying feels very different, but for your audience, the distinction of that, because they're so used to watching body language and listening to the tone of voice, that it's making it a little bit harder for them to see the distinction.
yeah. And as you said earlier, it is a challenge. The other challenge that's part of this too is that Rocky still has to sound like a 10-year-old,
Yes.
even with perhaps longer sentences and longer thoughts. Um, and one of the things I am also deliberate too are the adults in the book. So Pudge's mother, the school principal, any of the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That's another deliberate distinction I'm making in that they don't use contractions unless it sounds weird to not have it.
Mm-hmm.
They speak in longer sentences. I try to slip in some bigger words in there. I mean, that still
Mm-hmm.
are understandable for a 8 or 9-year-old, and they're not going to get hung up on a
Mm-hmm.
word. They can still understand them. But that's a way that I use to distinguish the adults from the kids, just in
Mm-hmm.
general, is that the adults sound like adults, and this is
Mm-hmm.
how kids would hear adults speaking. So I do hope that that does come through in
Mm-hmm.
the dialogue as another way to distinguish the characters. Okay, well,
Yeah.
good tips. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. I do have one other topic, but or not another topic. It's still on the same thing, but it's I guess it's men versus women, and how dialogue should be written. But I will, since I've taken up 20 minutes here, I guess, Mary, if
I just
you
had,
want to talk
no, go
about your,
ahead. No, you can go ahead, John. I just had a thought. I have not written, I've written short stories with a child and a parent, but not two siblings together. So I don't have, I don't have experience the way you're writing, but when you were talking, what came to mind is a hazard character. And I know your children are not hazard characters, but I thought, what if, and maybe you've already done this, give one of them something that distinguishes, that's kind of outlandish, like maybe a tick, when one
yeah.
gets nervous, or how sometimes at a funeral we'll laugh the total opposite of what you're supposed to do because you're nervous. So I don't know, maybe you could nurture or build one of them so that readers can identify whenever that child is present because of what he looks like or does or quirk, that's him right away. That's the only thing I was thinking.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I definitely think that when you're writing children's voices, you have a little bit more flexibility in the quirkiness that you can bring to their voices because children tend to be a little bit quirky,
Yeah.
by adult standards,
Thank
right?
goodness.
Right,
Thank goodness.
right. By adult
Yeah.
standards. They don't feel quirky when they're that age and they don't feel quirky to each other, but when adults watch them communicate with each other, there is a little bit of quirkiness. Sometimes there's a lisp or there's a stutter or there's just a hang up in when they talk, or they always start with a word that feels comfortable to them, even if it isn't a more of an impairment in their speech. They tend to start with something. A lot of times, especially when they're talking to their parents, kids start with their parents' name: mom, dad, 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 dad. Right, like this. Like it's almost as if they're so used to getting attention that way that they start with the or like if they're talking to their teacher and they raise their hand and they're used to calling their teacher's name when they speak. They don't so much tend to do it talking to each other. It tends to be more when they're talking to adults, at least in my experience. Maybe somebody has different experience than that, but kind of watching kids, they tend to talk to each other differently than they talk to adults, which is appropriate because adults speak differently when they're speaking to children. John, you mentioned something about the language that your adults use. And I love this idea that you're using more adult language. I would say using more complex sentence structure is another thing that
Yeah.
adults tend to do. And I wouldn't be afraid every once in a while to drop a word that's too big for your reader group from the parents and then have the kids call them out by like making a face or being like, what are you talking about? Right. And then giving them the opportunity to explain it. Lemony Snicket was really, really good about doing that in his
Mm,
series, where he would use a word that was clearly too big for the audience, but then would use the narrator to describe what that word meant. And I thought it was so, first of all, it was such a fun way of teaching vocabulary, but also it happens so much in real life where adults are just so used to using their lexicon, because I got to plug in lexicon, um, like their adult lexicon, and kids are like, what's a lexicon? And then you have to explain it. Like we get used to using these big words to, especially when we're correcting, and it sounds like Pudge and Rocky probably get in a little bit of trouble and probably need some guidance. And when parents get frustrated or they know that their kid needs instruction or direction, they tend to be much more adult in the language that they use with them. So there's some good opportunities in there to do that if you haven't already thought of that.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. I guess, Mary, is there anything else you want to say? Otherwise, I can.
No, do you want to do the
Yes.
female male?
Yeah. So,
That's
I
interesting.
I'm reading this book. It's called it's good. Writing Vivid Dialogue. It's by Rain Hall. I believe she's a UK author. And she has a whole series of just short, punchy books on a variety of writing topics. But I'm reading this one, and one of the chapters in her dialogue book is how do men and women talk differently? And that was thought provoking for me to read that chapter because in my books, these are for middle grade readers. I have not consciously been deliberately been trying to distinguish between male and female, boy and girl, or even for the adults, right? Adult male versus adult female and how they talk. It's really more about the personality, regardless of the gender. But as I am thinking of, in the future, I expect to write some adult novels, and I'll need to be able to distinguish women characters from male characters. So I just wanted to go through what's in this book and just get some comments, see what your reactions are to it. Um, she says in here, women mention their emotions more often. Is one of the things she mentions in here. It's not that men never do, but that women will do
And
it
we
more
keep
often.
on
So
doing it, John,
yeah.
over.
So so here's just a very short example that she gives. After a visit to the cinema, this is what a woman may say to her best friend. I am so disappointed. The film was crap. A man talking to his buddy says, the film was crap. So in the first case, the woman expresses her emotions about how she's feeling about the movie. The man does not. He just matter of fact about the movie. Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
so the first part of this I want to tackle is this idea that men and women speak differently is based on a very binary understanding of gender. And we know that gender is not a binary construct. Society has created a binary and has created traditional gender roles for men and traditional gender roles for women. And yes, a lot of us grew up learning how a quote woman speaks and how it's different than a quote man speaks, right? So I loved what you said at the beginning of this, John, where you were talking about how the personality of your characters are driving their voices. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to understand, and thinking about how gender, as well as other identity factors, age, race, religion, socioeconomic status, education, all of these things build and create a person. If you have a person, regardless of gender, who is very self-aware of their feelings, then I think that what you said it was Rain Hall, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What Rain Hall was saying is very appropriate, saying something like, I'm really disappointed in that. If someone is taught to name their emotions and use their emotions to influence other people, yes, that sounds very, very realistic. On the other hand, if a character grows up and is, taught not to talk about their feelings or emotions, oftentimes in the workplace, we're taught not to talk about emotions, but just talk about actions, right? So a character in a workplace may speak very different differently than they would in their personal relationships, right? Like in our personal relationships, we're taught to talk about things like feelings regardless of our gender, or hopefully we're taught to talk about that with our partners regardless of gender, because it's how we create connections versus in the workplace. So somebody in the workplace saying, I'm very disappointed by whatever, may feel very foreign, but at the same time, that same character at home with a partner or a family member saying, I was really disappointed, or like in the example that you're talking about at the movies, it could feel really realistic there. So, and yes, I do believe and understand that if we're looking at different groups of people and the way that they speak, there's a whole series and series of research on the differences between men and women, but they're limited in that they're mostly done in a binary construct. And I think as long as we can remember that we sometimes need to push beyond the binary, always need to push beyond the binary to really understand who our characters are. I think there are lots of lessons we can learn from looking at research like that and listening to different people of different genders, because the way that you
Sure.
identify often does impact the way that you speak, but it doesn't necessarily just have to be related to gender.
Yeah,
So,
sure. That's a good point.
yeah.
Um, I'm just going through what's in the
Yep.
book here. So I guess I have to read through this particular chapter again to
Sure.
see if there are any caveats regarding these. I mean, obviously this can't apply to everybody at every time, but it's just some tips on being
Absolutely.
able to distinguish. So one other one here that I'll just bring up for now that she writes, to quote, men use more posture, women more facial expressions. So an example that she gives here is John squared his shoulders. What did you say? And then Mary's brows drew together. What did you say? So in that first example,
Mm-hmm.
a male character posture squared his shoulders. In the second, uh, female character brows drew together.
Mm-hmm.
The dialogue within quotation marks is the same. What did you say? But the body language before that is different.
Yeah.
Now, of course, a woman or you know non-binary character can square their shoulders, and a man can draw his brows together. Of course. But I
Absolutely. And I think where the difference is there is what they're trying to communicate, right? Squaring your shoulders is a body language that is taking up more space and
Mhm.
preparing for a confrontation. Furrowing your brow is a much more internalization of what's being said. I think of those two examples both as great, great body language examples that communicate need and feeling in the dialogue. But if you hadn't told me that the first one was a man and the second one was a woman, I would have thought to the emotion of the scene more than I would have thought to the gender of the character. Because, like you said at the end, men furrow their brows all the time. Women
Yeah.
square their shoulders all the time. So I think the trick to it is not so much what gender your character is, but what are they trying to communicate in this moment? Are they
Yeah.
communicating strength? If they're communicating strength, squaring your shoulders, you mentioned it earlier with Pudge, clenching his fists, right? Like those are signs of I'm standing my ground. Versus furrowing the brow can be disappointment, can be worry. How are you stringing it together with what comes before it and what comes after it? What I really love about this book is that it is giving really tangible examples of way to use body language as a communication. Because as you mentioned, and we talk about on the podcast all the time, there's this idea that we miss so much of communication because we're only focusing on what's between the quotation marks. We're not adding that body language in, and the subtlety of squaring your shoulders versus furrowing your brow changes the whole impact of the sentence. And I think it's something that we as authors can really lean into to really boost the emotional impact of our characters.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'll leave it at that. For those listening, I'll just say Writing Vivid Dialogue by Rain Hall. Check it out. It's
yeah.
got a lot of good stuff. It's got some very basic stuff about where to place dialogue tags, but it does
Mm-hmm.
have some more interesting stuff about some of the things we've been talking about here.
Nice.
So it's good little book. I recommend it for those want to dig deeper into dialogues.
Absolutely. I'm excited to check it out because I love those examples that you gave. I think they're really tangible. Lets you kind of hold on to great examples. And I can't wait to hear and learn more about what she says about dialogue tag placement. So, because that's always dialogue tag placement is definitely a polarizing conversation in editing communities. So I like to hear different versions of that. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mary, you have any questions for us tonight?
Well, as you know, I've been mulling over writing some thriller lit fic with the background of thriller,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been reading a lot of Reachers. I don't know why, but I've just been reading a lot of Lee Child's Reacher, and you talk about subplots. I mean, my goodness, there are so many. So my question to you is, yeah, is there a formula? Is there a formula for when to introduce one? And I guess, if I took the subplots out of some of Lee Child's stories, they probably wouldn't be as good. So I assume that the subplot gives it more conflict, gives it more intrigue, right? But as far as timing, like, how do you decide when you're going to do it and how you're going to do it and how often, how many?
Yeah. So I think part of it depends on the length of your story.
Okay.
Sometimes subplots are introduced to add value to value is the wrong word, but I can't find the right one right now. So I'm going to go with value. Add value to the main storyline or the main theme, right? So typically you have one main plot, you have one main theme, and your story kind of revolves around that. If that plot line or theme isn't enough to fill a whole story, then you need subplots to keep your story interesting for the 80,000 words that you need to fill a story, write a book. Because there are some expectations on how long a book should be. I don't really know and understand how those are created. Somebody with much more publishing knowledge than I can give you much more detail into what makes a novel, what makes a novella, all of those things. I don't even understand. But there are some expectations, and we know that. And subplots can do that. But the other thing subplots can do is they can create interest for characters other than just the main character. And for a story like Reacher, that's really important because Reacher himself doesn't really change. So in order for the people around him to change, you need subplots to give the other characters growth arcs. Because ultimately, growth arc makes a story interesting for most readers. Not every reader needs them, but a lot of readers like a good growth arc. So a subplot can do that. The other thing a subplot can do is they can make characters feel real, because how many people do we know who just have one thing going on in their lives, right? I mean, there are times, don't get me wrong, there are times where I wish I only had one thing going on and everything else in my life was quiet. But that's just not the way life works. We have work and we have family and we have hobbies and we have commitments and volunteer stuff and we have chores and we have errands, and just life is very full. So creating subplots create characters that are multidimensional. They aren't just playing a role in the main story. So if you're thinking about why you are adding subplots, that can really help you to make your decisions on when they need to be introduced and when they need to be closed. There are some theories out there, and I will have to look it up because I learned it from JP, who learned it from someone who learned it from someone else. But there is I know the acronym is MICE, and there are the different kinds of subplots. I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to remember what they are, but the idea is they work kind of big in the story to small. And the way that I think about it is they work like parentheses in a math equation. You have to close a single set of parentheses from the inside before you can close the outside parentheses, and then the outside, and then the outside. So there are some theories on you introduce all of your plot and your subplot, and then you close them based in the reverse order that you open them.
Okay.
I also think that sometimes it's okay to open and close a subplot within an act. So if you're using a 3-act structure for your story, opening a subplot and closing it in Act 1, opening a subplot and closing it in Act 2, opening and closing a subplot in Act 3 can work. You can also open and close them per character based off of what the larger story needs. So as far as right and wrong, I think that there are probably some rules that a literature professor would teach, but I think every story needs to be written based off of what the story needs, and part of that comes from author voice. Maybe that's a cop-out.
No. It helps. No, it helps. That's why I'm reading. I'm trying to get a feel for because Child's timing, he has a formula. I haven't figured out what it is yet, but there is a pattern, and it works for him,
Yeah.
So I was just wondering.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, it's all right.
When you're writing a serial, the way that Reacher is, you're going to create a formula for your story. You're going to create a formula for your subplots. You're going to create a formula for your characters. You're going to create a formula for your growth arc, because that's what people like in series. They come back to a series because they like the comfort of, this is how this author does it. I know in a Reacher story, I'm going to get this many subplots. I know I'm going to get this many characters. I know Reacher's going to beat up this many people, right? Like, it's just, there's comfort in knowing what to expect.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say for your story, think about the reasons why you want to use a subplot. Is it to bring information into your main story? Is it to give your main story more, for lack of a better term, meat?
It's the other characters.
Or it's the other characters.
About their growth arc.
Yeah. So then as you're thinking about that, thinking about how the growth arc of the other characters impacts your main character's storyline.
Okay.
What do those characters need to do in their growth in order to make the story make sense? there's a new show on Hulu called Will Trent, and it's made from Karen Slaughter's Will Trent series. It is a great adaptation of the story, though they've gone very far away from the storylines in the books. Some of the stuff they've done I've really, really loved, especially with character development. Other stuff I've been a Karen Slaughter fan for years and years and years. But the reason that I bring that story up is because one of the characters is helping a young woman who has some troubles in her family. And that storyline is a subplot that is creating a story for Angie herself, because Angie looks at this girl and remembers her own childhood and comes in and tries to step in to help this young woman be safe and grow and become a productive member of society, yada, yada. But that subplot has to happen in order for Angie's subplot to happen, which needs to be closed up in order for the Will Trent character arc, which is the big storyline, to get to where it needs to be. So in that case, you've got your big story, you enter with Will Trent, then you introduce your Angie story, which is a set of parentheses inside the Will Trent story. And then you have this young woman's story, and I don't remember her name, I apologize. But her story has to wrap up in order to wrap up Angie's story, in order to wrap up Will's story. So they're introduced in that order: big story, middle story, little story, and they close little story, middle story, big story. So that's kind of an example of how the subplots can impact the larger story.
Fascinating. I find it fascinating. I don't know about writing it, but I find it fascinating. The process,
It's one of those things that I never gave any thought to until I started spending time in this community and I started listening to how authors think about plot. And now as I watch movies or television shows or I read stories, I'm like, oh, we're introducing a new subplot now. I wonder how it's going to fit with the bigger story. And it's like, I can't now unsee it now that I've seen behind the curtain. Doesn't make stories any less enjoyable. It's just fun now to think about as I read, why did this author create this subplot? What's the point? Because it also can be really frustrating for a reader. I know where I had thought about it prior to being part of the Dialogue Doctor community is when I'm reading a subplot and I'm like, why am I hearing this story? What does this have to do?
Yeah.
And then I start to get distracted from the story because I don't care about the subplot. I only care about the main characters. So that's definitely something that you want to make sure when you're introducing a subplot is that there's a tie-in that the reader understands. Why am I learning this?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So, yeah. John, do you have any thoughts on subplot?
Not much, because my books are about 35,000 words, for that 8 to 11 age group. So they're short, they're fast paced, they're linear. I haven't deliberately, maybe I have some micro plots in there, I don't know, but I haven't deliberately tried to add in any subplots. But I agree with I echo what you're saying, Laura. The little I've heard and learned about subplots is, yes, they need to intersect. Like the subplot needs to intersect with the main plot at some point, like maybe in Act 3 somewhere. I mean, that's, quote unquote rule I read somewhere, but yeah, I guess I need to watch out for that now as I watch TV shows and movies. It's like, oh, but it's a topic I haven't researched, so I don't have much to say on it.
Yeah, and I think that's appropriate too for the middle grade stories. They're not quite ready at that middle grade yet for the subplot. That feels like more like as you're moving from like the middle grades to I don't know what it's called, but right before young adults, that like
Upper middle
transition.
grade, yeah.
Yeah, upper middle grade. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That tends to be kind of where that subplot part gets brought in. So,
Now, I
Nice.
have noticed that some of the subplots in Child's book, they all close together at the end, which I kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know. But you're saying that that's not your experience of how, right? That
I mean, it can be, right? And it
Mhm.
takes, especially if to wrap up, like, I feel like often the summary of a reacher is resolving everything. Everybody's problem is actually caused by the same thing. So by reacher beating somebody up or taking down a whole class of villains, we're solving everybody's problem all at once, right?
You all
Because
get it right.
all
Mhm.
the villains get beat up in the end, so Reacher et al. Win. So I think that can absolutely be appropriate to close subplots all at once when the problem happens all at the same time.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it can be that way. It doesn't have to be that way.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's not quite that clean. I don't mean to like take Lee Child's work and
Oh
reduce it
no.
to um the smallest, because what Childs does is very effective and it's very entertaining. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from Reacher and the series and other stuff that Lee Childs has done as well. But yeah, I think that sometimes it's appropriate to wrap up all the subplots all at once. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes each one needs to be done individually. And I
Mhm.
think, again, it goes back to what is the reason that this subplot is being introduced? We're using subplots for different reasons, which means that they need to close based off of the reason. They need to be introduced and they need to be closed based off of the reason. What are they doing for the larger story? Because if we're just putting subplots in to just fill pages in our book, we're basically writing a mosaic. And even a mosaic, there still needs to be a thread that pulls it all together. I guess, unless you're writing a book of short stories, in which case your short stories don't
All be
need to
different.
connect. But even that, you need to tell your reader that they're reading a book of short stories. You can't say, this is my novel called My Great Novel, and then have it be a bunch of short stories. I'm really good at naming things. That's why Crayola is supporting me, because all of my blues are blue and all of my reds are red.
Oh,
You don't
well,
have
thank you.
Watermelon Splash and
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Periwinkle Sparkle. Yeah.
No, see, that's why you all are the authors. It's red and it's purple. But I love Watermelon Splash. And what was the other one you said?
Periwinkle Sparkle.
Oh yeah,
Periwinkle
that's good.
Sparkle.
That's a good
Wow.
one.
Yes. Oh, you could name nail polish colors or paint. That is awesome.
Paint. Yeah.
Yeah. No, no, I don't have that creativity. That's okay. I don't need it. I can enjoy the creativity others bring into the world.
Right.
So we have a few more minutes. Anyone have another question, or did we resolve all the itchy questions today?
You answered
I'm
mine.
I'm I'm satisfied. Yeah. So,
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you both for spending so much time with me today, talking dialogue and
Thank you.
subplots. I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off.